Gene had this job, Senior had this job of, it was called the French Atlantic Affair, and it was a cruise ship that was supposed to sink. So we built half a cruise ship, and it was on a special rig that could be floated out and then sunk. Okay, just draw it under the water and have some tubes on it and stuff like that. So I started building this ship model, half a cruise ship model. All the decks had to be open. You know, anything that wasn't to camera, that didn't have to look like cruise ship, was cut open and relieved so the water could flow around it and wouldn't turn it into float. You know, and we needed extra help. So Gene, I guess had just got out of the Navy then, and that's where I met Gene Rizzardi. He was helping with that.
It was late 70s at my father's. I think it's the first job that Gene Rizzardi had in the business with my father and I. I think it was. I think it was the first job he ever had. And yeah, it was a ship in, you know, not a very large scale, but it was a large ocean liner. So the thing was 22 feet long or something. So given the budgets we got in those days, you know, normally they couldn't afford to do that. They wouldn't spend the money, let's put it that way. Afford is a relative term. They would not spend money in those days on visual effects. It just wouldn't, a lot of money.
After about a year of doing industrial design type of work, I was talking to David Allen. He said, well, look, don't really tell anybody, but you can go over to this guy, Gene Warren Sr., because he's working on the French Atlantic Affair, and he needs model makers bad. So why don't you go over there? So I went over there and showed him my work, and he said, well, you can start right now. I said, well, I'll start in the morning. But that was my first into the movies, and it was a crazy experience, an absolutely crazy experience. Not your typical shop. It was piled up sets from Man from Atlantis, and God knows what else was in there, and sawdust on the floor, and you climb over things to build your models. And at that time, everybody used to smoke cigarettes, so you're in small areas, everybody's smoking cigarettes and flammables everywhere, and you're just wondering when you were all going to go up, you know. So, but it was a great experience. It was it was a good start. It was the craziest thing you could ever do, and something I really found that I enjoyed doing and I was good at. With that ship, we built it in a very short time frame. The model originally was built to be seen far away, and when I was called in, we had to kind of bring it so that it could be closer up. So we had to remodify it and everything. And finally, in the middle of the night, we drove it out to the Salton Sea, and started getting ready to set it up the next day. And while we were out there, we experienced an earthquake, like a 6-point something earthquake. And then when we finally got the ship out into the water, it was a very interesting thing. It was built onto a scissors lift mechanism that could raise it about 18 feet into the air. And then we took that whole rig out into the Salton Sea, and we sank it. And I don't know if you know anything about the Salton Sea, but you can't really see very far, and it's like working in a closet at night. Very, very dark down there. And we got the boat up, and we prepped it and got everything ready, and we were getting ready to load our charges and stuff on it because we were supposed to blow it up. So we've got it all prepped, and the locals there kept saying, you have to watch out for the winds out here. You have to really watch out for the winds. And we're going like, wind, whatever. And sure enough, just as we're ready to film, the winds came up, and they just started blowing more and more and more. And the more they blew, the bigger the waves got, until the waves started actually crashing over top of the model. And since the model was fastened to the seafloor, we couldn't just go out and rescue it. We were stuck, and the park ranger in his boat went out and he tried to, stabilize the model or whatever, but everything failed, and the boat got capsized and destroyed. And then we spent a lot of time picking up, explosives off the beach and boat parts and stuff. And and 2 weeks later, we were out there with another boat doing the same thing again because we had to get the shot. so a new boat had to be made, and we went out there and almost didn't get that shot too, because when we opened the valves stuck and the boat started sinking, and they started running the cameras real quick to get the shot. That was my very first, and it didn't scare me. I said, "This is crazy. This is a job for me."
And they were going to take it out and sink it in the Salton Sea and shoot that stuff. And so we get the thing built, and like the day before it was supposed to go out, my mom had a heart attack. So I couldn't, no way, So they took it out there, and I had family issues, and a storm came up, and before they could even roll camera on it, it destroyed the model, and they had it out there in the Salton Sea. But they had an old video camera on it, so they actually had proof, and Gene had gotten prop insurance. So the insurance had to pay off because he could prove that the model was destroyed. So, and then and I had already gone back to work at CPC again. So they had, I guess, Rizzardi, and I think Rizzardi and some other people came in and rebuilt it again. So what I built never got, never really got on camera.
I remember it was right around the French Atlantic Affair time that Star Wars was made, right around that time. It might have already been out, maybe within a year or so. I don't know. It was all within a few years there. So it was late 70s. But, Phil Tippett, who's legendary, was working with my father and I in, I guess, 77 or 76. It was when he got the call that he and John Berg got the job to animate these little critters on a chess set for this little movie, Star Wars. He was working with my father and I, and we were doing a couple of buy Mexican commercials for a Mexican production company, but we were doing these effects for them, and it was a breakaway factory that Phil was doing the roofs for, breakaway concrete out of molds, miniature stuff. And he still had 2 or 3 more days left when he got the call, and he I always remember that about Phil. He was a very responsible guy, and he said, "No, I told him that John and I could start in like 3 or 4 days, but I had to finish this job," which he did. He stayed and finished that, and then they went and animated the thing. So, but that Star Wars changed everything. That French Atlantic was, TV movie. Very little money, so.
I got called into his dad's office, Gene Sr., and, they'd already had a lot of, Meteor, they'd had some problems on it, and, with that tank and that, and I was looking at, he had one of the puppets from Jack the Giant Killer, the 2-headed giant, was sitting on the shelf. He's all like ratted out and that, and Gene was having to make the payroll and stuff like that, and he looks at me, and I'm looking at the Gigant or whatever the thing's name was. And he goes, "You want it?" And I went, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'll trade you your paycheck for it." I actually thought for a minute about it, but I got a wife, I got a kid, I got rent. I got Gene, I'd love to. So, but, it's like, and actually sitting in his office was the first time I ever saw a real Academy Award. He had his Time Machine Oscar sitting behind him on a shelf. He was a character. Oh, he was a character. I thought about it, but then, it's like, how the hell am I going to explain it? Kind of like Jack and the Beanstalk. I sent you out to bring home a paycheck, and you come back with this ratted ass puppet. Oopsie.